let's get started, okay? So, hello everybody, and again, everyone who's with me live, please feel free to type in the chat, and let's talk a little bit about deeds. And I'm going to ask you guys that are live with me questions, so that I want to see what you guys know about deeds, about stuff that we're going to be talking about. So, what is a deed? So, what is a deed? So, what is a deed? What do we have there? What is your definition? And guys, what I'll also tell you is this: super important for you to help you pass the exam is make sure you have like a 1 or 2 sentence kind of thing. Think of it as like your little blip about what a deed is or what anything is. You know, the more that you have as far as information about what something is, the easier it's going to be for you, so that you could potentially answer any kind of question, no matter how it's worded. Okay. So someone said evidence of transfer. Yeah, I like that. Okay. And what is it that's being transferred? So what is it that's being transferred? Okay. Evidence of transfer of title. So someone said that a deed is ownership of the property. So I want to clarify that a little bit, okay? So here's the thing. A deed isn't necessarily evidence of ownership of a property, because there are some deeds that you might have a deed to a property and you might have absolutely no ownership in the property, okay? So what we're going to talk about tonight is, like I said, the deed is evidence of transfer of title. Title is proof of ownership. Now, there are some deeds, like a quitclaim deed, when we get into that, where the grantor, okay, is basically saying, I'm not telling you that I have ownership or I don't have ownership. So there's actually some deeds that you might hold that you actually don't have ownership of the property, okay? So that being said, let's do this. What is needed for a valid deed? So what do we need for a valid deed? Can someone rattle off one thing that we need for a valid deed? Okay. And we're talking about not necessarily being recorded, okay? Not necessarily being recorded. Oh, great. Love that first one. We need to have signature of the grantors. Okay, signature of the grantor. Someone says acceptance. I say delivery and acceptance. Always love that. Okay, competent parties. Yeah, people have to be living and competent. Okay, and here's the thing. That's like one of those that I don't necessarily put that in there when I describe what is needed for a valid deed. You need that, but that's kind of like one of those that's understood, because there has to be delivery and acceptance. It's almost like they don't say that in a lot of textbooks, but that definitely is something that you need. There's a couple more things that we need. Need a legal description of the property. Okay, need a legal description of the property. What else? We need some more stuff. We need some more things. Okay, who can tell me what's missing here? Okay. We need consideration, okay? The other thing we need, last and final, that I don't think we have here, is the granting clause, okay? Or words of conveyance. And anyone that's with me live, can you tell me what words of conveyance is? What do I mean by a granting clause or words of conveyance, as I take a little sippy of water? What do I mean by a granting clause? Like, what is that section of the deed? Do you guys know? Want to take a stab at it? If not, I will gladly tell you. The granting clause is this. The granting clause basically outlines, it outlines what is being given, okay? So someone said habendum clause, okay? And actually, you know what? I love that you said that, because a lot of teachers teach that the granting clause is the habendum clause. Within the words of conveyance or the granting clause, you will have the habendum clause. So think of it this way. What I'm saying in regards to what is necessary for a valid deed, the granting clause, okay, or words of conveyance, is more broad than that of a habendum clause. Within that, okay, within that explanation will contain the habendum clause. So here's what happens. They'll talk about, and we'll talk about the, whatchamacallit, we'll talk about tonight the different freehold estates that you can have. So what's going to happen is this. Within the granting clause or the words of conveyance, they're going to talk about how you're taking title. Okay. They're going to talk about what type of freehold estate it is. Okay. So they're going to talk about how you're taking title, what type of freehold estate it is, what type of deed is being given. You will have the habendum clause in there. Okay. So the words of conveyance much broader than that of just the habendum clause. And I think that that's super important for us to understand, because a lot of people say, oh, you just need the habendum clause. No, you need much more than the habendum clause. And that's why I say the words of conveyance granting clause. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. And just give me a thumbs up, smiley face, whatever you'd like to do, so that I know that you guys are still with me and that I haven't lost anyone. And here's the thing. What I'll tell you is this. The reason I want to make sure that everyone who's with me live, I want to make sure you're getting it and you're getting the most out of this, because this is really honestly for you guys. So that's why I like making sure, doing a little gut check, seeing if you guys are still with me or if there's anything that I missed. So if you have a question throughout this, again, keep in mind, this is your class. So I want to make sure that I answer any questions that you might have in regards to this. So are there any questions in regards to what is needed for a valid deed? Looks like not. I'm going to keep going. You ready? So what do we need to record a deed? Also, why would we record a deed? Okay, so what is needed? What do we need to record a deed, and why would we record it? Okay, so I think those two questions are really important. And why it gives constructive notice. Bang, absolutely. That is perfect. Why it gives constructive notice. So give yourself a gold star, smiley face. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now, what else? I'm going to ask you this. For those of us who don't know what constructive notice is, because guess what? Sometimes we don't know all these fancy words. What is this constructive notice? What is that? Does anyone know what constructive notice is? The grantee's signature. You don't actually need that for a recording. You need to have the signature of the grantor acknowledged, okay? But you don't need to have the grantee's signature. But what I'm going into now is kind of like why we're going to record it. Like, why are we going to even do this? And we said constructive notice. So there's two types of notice, and I want to explain them to you, okay? You corrected the spelling. I love it. I love it. So here's what happens with constructive notice. That's basically telling the world, hey, I have this deed, okay? I have this deed to the property, okay? And what happens is this. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, most people won't really care that you have a deed to that property, okay? But if they're interested in potentially purchasing it, or maybe they're interested in leasing it, things like that, they might have an interest to the property that is going to, at some point, cause them to want to say, hey, I want to double check and see if Stu actually has ownership to this property, right? Does that make sense? So here's what's going to happen. Constructive notice basically tells the world that you have this deed. Actual notice, so let me tell you what actual notice is. Actual notice is if I told you something. If I said to you guys right now, I'm wearing a gray shirt, you have actual notice that I'm wearing a gray shirt, okay? Now, if I put on Twitter, hey, I'm wearing a gray shirt, and anyone who cared about me wearing a gray shirt could go and find it, then that would be an example of, what was I going to say? An example of constructive notice. So there's two types of notice, constructive and actual. And the reason we record a deed is to provide constructive notice for the general public and anyone who would care about that. Okay. So what we need to record a deed is it needs to be acknowledged. The signature needs to be acknowledged. Okay. So yeah, basically what happens is this: recording a deed helps against property being sold more than once. Someone said in the chat, yeah, absolutely. It helps to establish that someone has deed and that title has been transferred. And so what happens is this: that's what recording does. So actual notice is when you actually have direct knowledge of something. So that's what that is, Brenda. Actual notice is when you have direct knowledge of something. So recording doesn't create actual, it creates constructive notice. So that's the situation that we have there. Now, are there any questions, concerns, burning desires before I erasey? Because I'm going to have to do some erasey with the screen right now. So we're good? Okay, awesome sauce. I don't see anything. So I'm going to cross off deeds as something that we've gone over quasi, because I haven't told you what types of deeds there are. So the first thing I want to do, though, is go over the legal descriptions, okay? That I think is super important because that's where the meets and bounds are going to come in, right? So legal descriptions of properties. And here's what I'm also going to tell you. I know that I might be going a little fast. Again, ask any questions you want live in the chat because I have that up and I'm keeping my eyeballs peeled on that one. What I will tell you is this. Ask me any questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move fairly quickly through things so that we hopefully get through as much material as humanly possible so that we leave no stone unturned. And again, you're going to have the recording for this for anyone who's live with me. So that's why you could go back and reference all that material there. So the legal description of the properties. We have three. There is the meets and bounds. Okay, there is the rectangular or government survey system. Then there is the recorded plat of subdivision. So let's talk about meets and bounds because I think that that one was one of the big bugaboos that you guys had, and I'm going to search high and low for an exact replica of what those questions are on the test. But tell me what the meets and bounds description is. Like, how would you guys describe that if you had to get a good description of it yourselves? Oh my God, please don't all jump at once. Point of beginning, yeah. Let's see. So I'm going to draw some stuff. You ready? So let's say this was a lot, okay? What would happen is this, okay? They would pick a point of beginning, okay? And then what they do is this. They would describe the property in a clockwise fashion, okay? Ending at the point of beginning, okay? So it begins and ends at the point of beginning, and they use what's called monuments or rebar, which is man-made monuments. So let me tell you how the government survey, the meets and bounds system first started. Basically what happened was when we colonized, this was probably the more heavily used way to describe property in a legal sense, okay? This was the more heavily agreed upon way to describe property. And here's what they would do. They would say, starting at a point, okay, on the property, go 70 paces due southwest till you hit Mr. Smith's oak tree. So you're probably sitting there scratching your head saying, I could see the problem with this already. Mr. Smith's oak tree typically wasn't standing for too long. There was also times where they used a lot of different things. So now what they use is they use man-made monuments called rebar, okay, where it's basically like stamped metal. So if you're ever walking along a sidewalk or you're over by your curb, you might see, a piece of metal with a stamp on it with like a marking or some sort. That would be a monument for a meets and bounds system. So what happened was this. We use this mostly in like our 13 colonies. It's still used today because they are using man-made monuments such as rebar, okay? And again, I think on the test, they're giving you some sort of diagram, but I'm not sure what they're asking you or what kind of diagram they're giving you or what kind of information they're giving you or lack thereof. So I know it's on the test. This is my best description of it. And I'm going to try to suss out the question a little better and hopefully within a week or so get you that information. So that is the meets and bounds system, okay? Again, used primarily over on the East Coast, but it is used also throughout the country because they've improved the system with man-made monuments. So guys, if you have any questions, let me know, okay? Type it in the chat. And we'll go on to the government survey system or the rectangular survey system, okay? Looks like you guys are fantastic. You're doing great. No questions. So the rectangular, the government survey system works like this. There is a line that is much straighter than that called a prime meridian, okay? And that runs north to south. And then there are lines throughout the country that run west to east, okay? And those are called baselines, okay? And what happens is this. There are township and range lines, okay? There are township and range lines which make up a grid, okay? So think of this. All the states that have pretty little you know, lines and borders and all that kind of stuff, they're probably using a government survey system. We started using this in the country in 1775 when we were moving out west, okay? So what happened was this. Basically, they looked at this system, the meets and bounds, and they were like, oh man, that's not really that great. Let's start using some other different types of systems. And they came up with the government survey or the rectangular survey system. Not used in any of the original 13 colonies. But what happens is this. What you need to know, okay, is just that there's a prime meridian and a baseline. And each one of these little squares, okay, that's called a township. And a township has 36 sections. And each section is 1 square mile, okay? Now, do I have any Cali folks in here? Do I have any Cali or West Coast folks? Anybody on the West Coast? Is it not 7:30 with anybody who is in this call? Great, that means we could do math tonight. We could do a little bit of math because I know you guys love that. So, yeah, that is the situation there. So we don't need to talk any further about the rectangular government survey system. Do you guys have any questions on that before I do some erasey? Speak now, forever hold our peace. Amazing. We're going to keep going. I'm erasing. Yeah. Oh, I'll get that back. I'll get that little thing back. Because I erased too much. Sometimes we get too happy with the erasey. So we have to do some undoing. Okay, so I erase like everything. Yeah. It looks like you guys are saying, no, thank you. Everything's good. Yeah, so here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this up. I'm going to talk to you about now the recorded plat of subdivision. This is also known as the lot and block system. Okay. So what happens is this. Lot and block system is probably the most popular. Like if you had to sit there and say, oh, what are they going to use in almost all forms of, describing something, lot and block or recorded plat of subdivision. Basically, there is a map in the township, okay? And the map in the township will dictate a lot and a block number. So what happens is your property is going to be identified through a lot and block, okay? That correlates to the plat map at the county records, okay? And it's that simple. It's a very easy way to figure out where land is, to describe land. It is also very easy to work with irregular lot sizes, so there's no extraneous things that you need to do. You can have a bunch of different lots that look completely, totally, outrageously different, and that's why the recorded plat of subdivision or lot and block system is probably the most popular. Everyone loves it. Heart, heart, heart. Yes, absolutely. And like I said, states on the West Coast, though, will be using the rectangular survey system a lot as well. Okay, so that is legal descriptions. So we're going to cross off legal descriptions, and we're going to go more into deeds. We're going to kind of wrap up and have a complete thought with deeds. Okay. So is there anything that I haven't covered so far in deeds or legal descriptions that you think that might be important or that you'd like to know? Type it into the chat if there is something you're like, oh, I remember someone talking about this. And then we'll talk about the different types of deeds. Okay. All right. As long as you guys are good, I'm good. Okay. And I love that you guys are spending some time with me, especially on a Friday night. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So, who wants to tell me what a warranty deed is? What's a warranty deed? What's a warranty deed? I don't know. So here's what I'm going to tell you. This is the best deed a grantee could get. So what happens is this, okay? This is, and what I usually like to do is I like to say the quote that the, like the promises that the grantor is going to be giving. And now I'm talking about a grantor and a grantee. Stu, who's the grantor? Who's the grantee? And I've said this a couple times. The grantor is who? They're the ones that are transferring. And the grantee is the one receiving. Okay? Because we have the good old saying, OR gives and the EE receives. Right? OR gives and the EE receives. Okay? So that being said, let's go back to our description here. So this is the best deed a grantee could get. Why? Because the grantor is saying, I own and will defend against all claims. Okay? I own and will defend against all claims. So any and all claims I will defend against. Okay? Next one, special warranty deed, also known as a bargain and sale CVG, which is the covenants against the grantors. And that's more commonly referred to in states like in our East Coast states, because what happens is this is a super common deed, okay? So what happens is this, and Lisa said the owner owns the property free and clear in a warranty deed. They might not, okay? What happens is this. You can have a warranty deed passed to you, but you could still have an encumbrance like a mortgage on the property. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you own it free and clear. It simply means that the interest that was passed to you, because again, remember, a deed is evidence of transfer of title. Okay, so a deed is evidence of transfer of a title. The grantor, the one who originally had the title, said, hey, I own it and I'm going to defend it against anything that happened during my time, anything that happened before it, and anything that happens after it. Okay. So that is the situation with that, okay? So let's talk about this. This special warranty deed, or the bargain and sale with the Covenants Against the Grantors Act, is going to be most commonly used in sales, okay? So if there's a sale, this is probably going to be the most commonly used one. And I say probably because there are certain scenarios where there might be an asterisk, okay? And this says, I own, okay? The grantor is saying, I own and will defend against only claims during my ownership, okay? So they're basically saying, hey, anything that happened while I own the property, I'm totally cool with defending against. However, if it comes before or after my time, I'm not going to be stuck with that, okay? So that is most commonly used for the sale of real estate, okay? Next one is a straight bargain and sale deed, okay? So what is a bargain and sale deed? What do you guys know what that is while I take the little sippy of water? Who wants to take a stab at it? And if you didn't notice, I'm actually going in order of the most protective for the grantor, okay? And wow, what are we wowing? What are we wowing? Is it a good wow? Or is a light bulb going off? I hope a light bulb's going off. So bargain and sale deed, here's what this is. You ready? Bargain and sale deed is typically used in foreclosure properties, okay, foreclosure sales, okay, and they say, I own, but will not defend. So basically what happens is the bank's saying, hey, we took title to the property, right? Took title to the property, but we are not going to defend it against anything. We are not going to defend it against anything, okay? Because here's the thing, they don't know what kind of encumbrances could be on it. It's a little buyer beware. And that's the thing, the buyer's taking on some risk when it comes to taking a bargain and sale deed and purchasing a foreclosure. But that's typically going to be used in our foreclosure sales. Last but not least is the quitclaim. That's awesome. And here's the thing, I hope there's more wows for things that I clear up for you guys, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you guys out, get you some, you know, quick bursts of information and cover a lot of topics. So let's keep moving, let's keep grooving on this stuff. So here we got a quitclaim deed. This is typically used in transfers between family, okay, divorce, okay, estates, a whole bunch of things. Also to clear clouds and title. Now, this says I may or may not own and will not defend. So remember earlier when I was saying, hey, just because you have a deed doesn't mean that you have ownership, right? So if I have a quitclaim deed to somebody's property, that doesn't mean that I have ownership to their property. That simply means that I have whatever ownership they might have had, okay? And here's the thing, they might have had ownership, okay? Yeah, a quitclaim deed guarantees nothing. It's basically the bubkiss of deeds, okay? It's the bubkiss of deeds. It's basically, okay, you're getting nothing. Okay, but here's the thing, you might be getting something like in a divorce situation where they just want to, you know, sign it, done, over with, you know, yeah, you might be getting the property. Like that's totally possible. Okay. Yes, and some people always do. Everyone, and Emily, you are not the first one to do that. You are not going to be the last. Some people do mix it up. They get their little dyslexia out and they call it a quitclaim deed. Q-U-I-C-K. It's a quitclaim. You're quitting any claim on the property. Yes, it is quick as well. That's why people sometimes refer to it as a quitclaim deed, but you're quitting any claims that you have to the property. Okay. Also, little known fact, a lot of people don't know this, bonus material for you guys. Okay. This is also how a dominant tenement would dissolve an easement. Little known fact, okay? Dissolve an easement. As you can tell, I can't write with my mouse, okay? But I tried for you guys, okay? So let's say there was an easement appurtenant, okay? If the dominant tenement was like, yeah, I don't need this anymore, they would sign a quitclaim deed to the servient tenement for the servient tenement's property. Because basically what they're saying is, whatever interest I have in this property, which happens to be an easement, you now have, and you're transferring it over. So not a lot of people realize that that's actually how you're going to dissolve an easement appurtenant if you didn't want to do that by any other operation. So guys, before I start erasey, let me know if you need anything up here for another second. If you're like, hey, just writing a quick note down. Stu, I love your smiley face. Stu, I love your handwriting. It's amazing. I could totally read it. Thank you if you are saying that, and even if it's in your head. So, looking good. Cool. Awesome. And I hope you guys are getting something out of today because, like I said, a lot of TLC, a lot of love in this. So let's see. So we did deeds. We did legal descriptions. And here's what I'm going to say. We're going to go on to freehold estates and less than freehold estates. Okay? Because I think that those are two things that people always get confused with. So tell me, what is a freehold estate? What is a freehold estate? What is that? Okay. Anyone in my live chat want to tell me what they think a freehold estate is? Let me tell you what it is. Ownership. Full bundle of rights. Okay. That's how I refer to it. Okay. Full bundle of rights. Ownership, interest, in land. Yes, 100%. Freehold estates are ownership. Full bundle of rights. How I remember the full bundle of rights is PUTEE. Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Freehold estates aren't the greatest ownership because here's the thing. There's 3 different types. So we haven't classified any of them yet. Okay. So freehold estates, we have 3 of them. Okay. But when we just say, I have a freehold estate, we don't have enough information to understand more about what they own, okay? But we can kind of guess that they have ownership because anything within a freehold estate is going to be ownership. So let me tell you what the bundle of rights are. The right to possess, the right to use, the right to transfer, exclude, and encumber. Now, some of your teachers, some of your textbooks might use other acronyms. There's probably synonyms for what I just put up there right now, okay? So, and just keep that in mind too. Sometimes I use words, and here's the thing. I also expose you to a lot of different words. So sometimes I might use in one webinar, in one video, I might use this acronym. I might use some others. This is the one I usually lean towards. There's a couple of others that are out there that I like too. But again, I like the right to possess, use, transfer, exclude, and encumber. It reminds me of poutine, which is an amazing, amazing French fried dish from Canada. It's basically for those of us who are in New Jersey, as I know I have a bunch of us in Jersey, they're disco fries. Poutine is disco fries. It's Canadian disco fries. That's what it is. So I digress though. I went a little off trail. So let's talk about fee simple, also referred to as fee simple absolute. Yeah, disco fries are yum. Yeah, absolutely. I can't argue with that. So someone said that this is the best, or maybe they're talking about the disco fries and the poutine still. This is the best / highest, most complete form of ownership. Okay, so basically what happens is this. When you own a property, fee simple, okay? When you own a property, fee simple, what happens is this. You basically own it, and the only restriction to you owning it is that of law, okay? So here's the thing. My little beach house, I can't construct a 90-story billboard that says Stu Jacobson is the best real estate instructor in the world and put lights on it and spotlights and put noisemakers. No, I can't do that. Although I would love to, okay? Awesome advertising right over here down by the beach. It would be something that I can't do that because the zoning regulations, police powers that the government has on my property, basically, I couldn't do that. So Fee simple, fee absolute ownership is basically highest, best, most complete form of ownership, and the only thing that is limiting is that of law, okay? So that is fee simple, fee absolute. The next one is fee defeasible. And now I've heard it also mentioned as qualified fee. I've also seen it as conditional fee. Okay, or fee conditional. This is, okay, so this is ownership with conditions. Okay, and notice how the word ownership is in each one of them, okay, because you have the right to possess, use, transfer, exclude, and encumber, okay, even with a condition on it. What happens is this: the condition creates a defeatable moment, meaning that your ownership to the property could be defeated if you opt to or you actually engage in whatever that activity is that you shouldn't be doing, the naughty naughties, okay? So if it says, hey, you cannot have a situation where you sell alcohol on this property and then all of a sudden you open up Stu's amazing silly liquor store, okay? Guess what? My ownership could be defeated, okay? If that is the condition, I break that condition, my ownership will be defeated. That's why they call it defeasible. And here's another thing, another Stu tip for you. A lot of the times, the explanation of what it is actually in the words. So if they talk about qualified fee, conditional fee, that means fee that could be qualified, meaning I have not sold alcohol here, so my fee is qualified. Okay, I have it. Okay, conditional fee. I have fee ownership with the condition that I cannot sell liquor here. Fee defeasible means I have fee that is defeatable on the occurrence or non-occurrence of something. Do you guys see how that kind of works? Even when we're talking about exclusive right to sell, things like that, it's something that is always. Here's the thing. I always tell you this, and if I do have any attorneys watching the recording, I apologize ahead of time. But legalese and attorneys, they're not the brightest bulbs in the batch, okay? Because, and the reason I say that is because a lot of legalese is kind of like the name is already in there. It's like they don't think too hard with the naming schemes, okay? So fee simple absolute is simply absolute fee, right? That's what it is. And our third and final type of freehold estate, okay, boom, 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 is a life estate. And this is the one that we usually spend a little bit of time on. So life estate is that of, okay, it's ownership based on the life of someone or something, okay? Ownership based on the life of someone or something, okay? And what do I mean by that? I mean, they have ownership. So someone asked me today earlier, so here's the thing, it's based on, so if I just say a life estate, and here, Emily actually brings up a good point because she said for the duration of their life. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a thing. So I have Bob here, gives Sally a life estate. If that's how they word the question, then it's based on Sally's life, okay? If they say Bob gives Sally a life estate, assume that it's based on Sally's life and it reverts back to Bob, okay? If that's how it's worded. If they say Bob gives Sally a life estate based on the life of Richard, okay, based on the life of Richard, then what happens is this. Assume that Bob is giving Sally a life estate based on the life of Richard, and if nothing else is said, it reverts to Bob upon the death or the plotsing of Richard, for anyone who speaks Yiddish. Okay, not that I speak Yiddish, but that's about the only Yiddish I know is Platz means to die. That's it. I have more useless information in my head than anything else. So if you guys want useless information, maybe I'll start a whole YouTube channel on all the different useless information I have. However, I digress a little bit. Let's talk about this. What is, because everyone always asks me, Stu, what is a remainder man? What is a remainder man? Okay. A remainder man is basically this. Okay. When we have, and we're going to cross this line out because it seems like if I erase that, I'm going to erase everything. If Bob gives Sally a life estate and then says upon Sally's death, it goes to Bob's brother, Frank. Okay, Frank owns, instead of it reverting, and we call this a reversionary interest. Okay, this is a reversionary interest. Instead of it reverting, it goes to a remainder man. Okay, it goes to a remainder man, which is Frank. Okay, so do you guys understand life estates now a little bit better? And I'm actually going to ask you a question. During Sally's life, can she sell or lease her interest or encumber it? Can she do that? Oh my God, so many yeses, so many gold stars. Yes, because she has ownership. And let me also tell you this. If she has a life estate that is pour autre vie or based on the life of another, she could devise it as well. And what does devise mean? What is this word, devise? What is that? What does that mean? To will real property, to will real property. Absolutely. So that's what happens. So here's the thing. If it just says a life estate, that means it's based on the life tenant, whoever holds that life estate. If it says life estate pour autre vie or life estate based on the life of someone other than the life tenant, that means that they could certainly will it in addition to everything else. However, when the person that the ownership is based on, when the person whose life the ownership is based on dies, the ownership ceases to exist. So here's a common one that they love to give you. You ready? They would say, and I'm going to start erasing so that we actually have a clear panel here because I need some space. I need some whiteboard. Okay, it's like Christopher Walken. I need some cowbell. So here's the thing. They'll say, and I'm actually going to erase all this. Okay, so I have a fever, and the only cure for that fever is more life estates. Yes, I'm a sick puppy. Okay, I've been doing this for 13 years. It gets to you. It gets to me. So if you guys have been studying for a couple months, okay, and you're like, oh my God, my eye's twitching. Think about this. I had a 6-pack and a full head of hair. I'm bald, practically cross-eyed, and probably about another 100 pounds on me. So this is what 12, 13 years of teaching does to you. I digress, though. I digress. I had to get a little laugh in because it's late at night. So Bob gives Sally a life estate, okay? And now Sally, okay, Sally leases it to Frank for 7 years. Okay, 7-year lease. Now, on the 3rd year, Sally Kaputskis. What happens to Frank's lease? What happens to Frank's lease? Someone said I'm silly. I have to be silly. So it reverts to Bob. Yeah, you guys know. So once she Kaputskis, it goes back to Bob. No matter what. No matter what. Okay? I mean, yes, that's great that Frank signed a 7-year lease. However, the ownership which Sally had the right to give to him, to lease to him, and actually, I'm going to give you another word that's not used that often, but I want you to have more words in your head than not. To lease a property is to demise it. So devise is to will, demise with an M as in Mary is to lease it. Because I love you guys, and I want to make sure that you get as many words in as possible. So demise is to lease. So when Sally demised to Frank, her life estate for 7 years, what happened was she could only demise that for the length of her ownership, which ended when she plots, okay? When she plots in Kibbutski. So good stuff, guys. I'm glad you got that. There we go. So now, let me know if you have any other questions, okay? Because now we're going to go to less than freehold estates, also known as leasehold estates, okay? Leasehold estates, okay? So whenever I'm talking about a less than freehold or a leasehold estate, I'm referring to basically, so remember when I said freehold estates are ownership, and I didn't say that too long ago, probably like 5-10 minutes ago, right? I said, hey, the freehold estates are ownership. Less than freehold estates are less than ownership. So what happens is, if I said you get the full bundle of rights in a freehold estate, what do you get in a less than freehold estate? What do you get? If you get the full bundle of rights in a freehold estate, what do you get in a less than freehold estate? Possession, enjoyment. Yeah, I'll take that. I like possession. And use is what I lean towards, okay? Possession, use. But if you say enjoyment, anything like that, like, yeah, I'm cool with that too. Like, I could definitely be down with that. So let's talk about the different types of less than freehold estates. We have an estate for years, okay? What is an estate for years? What is an estate for years? Okay. What is that? Estate for years. That means that I have it for a long, long time. No. Basically, someone said June to June. It has a definite period of time, definite ending, okay? Definite ending. So here's the thing. If you could look at a lease and go, the lease ends on June 1st. Cool. Awesome. That's an estate for years. Guess what? When I go away with my wife and I say, hey, wife of mine, okay, would you like to rent a unit for a week? Okay. My wife would be like, sure. Like right now, we're actually contemplating getting a vacation rental for a week in March, barring that COVID is gone. We're going to go away to South Carolina for a week in March. Yay. Okay. I'm excited about that. So is my wife. So we're going to have a week-long rental of, we're going to get a big mansion. And we're going to have like a bunch of friends over. So a lot of fun. Okay. And here's the thing. I told you a lot of things about this and sounds like a lot of fun things. And sure, absolutely. We're going to have 15 bedrooms. So sure, you guys could come too. Come along, you know. But I digress a little bit. What is that? Is that an estate for years? So I'm going to rent a condo for a week. Is that an estate for years? No? Someone said no? Why isn't that an estate for years? Franco, tell me why that isn't. Give me your argument. Someone said a periodic tenancy? Well, here's the thing. Let me ask you a question. So anyone who's saying that no, it's not, what happens is this. Didn't I just tell you that an estate for years has a definitive ending date? Right? True. Yeah, now you're coming to my side a little bit. Sure. So here's the thing. An estate for years has a definitive ending date. It does not have a qualifier for how long or short it has to be, okay? An estate for years, okay? An estate for years, and that's why you're confused. Yeah, and that's why I'm unconfusing you. So that's why I want to ask you, and here's the thing. That's why for everyone who's watching this live, you know, I want to ask you those questions because you have questions that I would guess a lot of people also have. Like this is, here's the thing, the confusion behind an estate for years and a periodic tenancy, which we'll get to next, okay, it is basically like the litmus test of like, how do I identify it? How do I identify that this is a thing? You know, like my wife's a veterinarian. She is professionally trained to tell the difference between a cat and a dog. So what happens is this, we got to sit here and we got to figure out the differences between our estates for years, our freehold estates, our less than freehold estates, okay? Oh, that's awesome. Your wife is a vet too? That's awesome. You have to tell me where she works because mine is in Central Jersey. So we'll talk about that when I end my recording too. So here's what, oh, she's a vet, oh, mine's a veterinarian. So yeah. So I don't know if you're talking about vet, like Army vet, and I always forget that too. Look, I'm digressing a lot. Yes, if it's a definite period of time, it is an estate for years, okay? 100%, okay? If it is a definite period of time, it is an estate for years. Now, let's talk about a periodic tenancy, okay? And why do they call it an estate for years if it just has a definitive period of time? Because I remember I told you that attorneys aren't the swiftest light bulbs in the batch, okay? When an attorney says 4 years, that means that it has a calendar date, okay? 4 years has a calendar date. So what happens is the litmus test for that, how do we define it, is it has a definitive ending, okay? A periodic tenancy goes from period to period. It auto renews, okay? So basically what happens is you don't have to say anything, okay? It auto renews from period to period, okay? So what happens with the periodic tenancy? So this is why that week-long rental that I'm getting out in South Carolina with my wife in March, that's why that is an estate for years versus a periodic tenancy, okay? Because if it was a periodic tenancy, basically I would be sitting in South Carolina for ever and ever and ever until I just said, okay, no, I'm done. I'm not, like, we're good, okay? Because it just auto renews. So a classic version of this is our month-to-month leases, right? Our month-to-month leases. Estate for years is going to be one that has a definitive period of time, okay? Periodic tenancy auto renews. So there's no end date, okay? There's no end date. It's not like like you're going to say, okay, it ends at the end of whatever. Because here's what people get confused with. They say, okay, I had an annual rental that I paid monthly for. So what happened was people think, okay, that they had a periodic tenancy. Unless it renewed for another year automatically, then you had an estate for years because it had a definitive ending date, okay? Now, there might have been clauses in there that said, oh, you're allowed to renegotiate, you're allowed to, re-up and release it for this much period of time. There could have been things in there, but when we're looking at a lease, it either auto-renews, it's a month-to-month with no end date, or it has a definitive ending, okay, where it just, boom, an estate for years, okay? So, next one is going to be an estate at will, okay? Also known as a tenancy at will, okay? Sometimes they refer to a periodic tenancy also as a periodic estate, okay? And they might sometimes refer to an estate for years as, actually, no, they usually or a tenancy for years. That's sometimes what they refer to it as. So be malleable in your words, guys. So I usually put my / hyphen, and I give you, like I said, I give you a lot of the synonyms, but I want you to know what those are. So an estate at will, this has no defined terms, but landlord and tenant are okie dokie, okay? So, and okie dokie is a super technical legalese term, okay? So here's what I'm going to tell you. I'll give you a perfect example of when an estate at will would happen, okay? Let's say I have an estate for years, okay? And it ends September 1st. And I go to my landlord and I say, hey, Mr. Landlord, I'm buying a property and we really don't know when the closing date's going to be. We think it might be the middle of the month. It might be a day. It's kind of up in the air. Would it be okay if I stayed here? Landlord goes, you've been an awesome tenant. I love you. You're a bald guy. I'm a bald guy. Like, we're kin, okay? So yeah, absolutely. Let's do this, okay? So someone said, if I sign a lease from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021, what leasehold do I have? You have an estate for years because you have an end date. If there's an end date, you have an estate for years. I don't care how you put it. You have an estate for years. Whenever there's an end date, you have an estate for years. Okay, definitive ending. Boom, done. Okay, everything else doesn't have that. So periodic tenancy, we have a period. Okay, so what happens is there's a defined period here with the periodic tenancy. Okay, so let's just say that we've defined a period somehow, some way. We've defined a period. Okay, whether that's a week, whether that's a month, whether that's 2 months, whatever the case may be, we have defined a period and it auto renews from period to period. Okay, estate at will. Going back to my story, landlord says, sure, you could stay a day, a week, whatever the case may be. No one's kicking them out. Everybody's okie dokies. Okay, now what happens is this. Let's say I stay for a month and my wife says to me, hun, you know you have to go and pay the landlord. We've been here a month. They're not kicking us out. Let's go and tell the landlord, hey, you know, here's money for the last month that we stayed, because the closing just keeps getting pushed back because, oh my God, the seller's a pain in the tuchus, okay? Pain in the tuchus. Now, let me ask you this. What, do I still have an estate at will? I pay the landlord rent. Landlord accepts the rent. Landlord goes, thank you so much for the money. Everyone's still happy. No one's doing the kicking out. Okay. Do I still have an estate at will? Maybe. So someone says I still have an estate at will. Okay. I don't have a tenancy at sufferance because everyone's still okie dokie. He took my money. So we won't call it an estate at sufferance. What do I have? So let me tell you this. I no longer have an estate at will. That is correct. If you said I don't have an estate at will, that is 100% correct. It is no longer an estate at will. So what is it though? So period to period, Brenda, Elisa, yeah, it is a period to period. Once I establish a period by giving him the rent, okay, so what happened was this. I established a period by giving him a month rent, okay? It is now turned into, as long as he's not kicking me out, it is turned into a periodic estate, okay? Because an estate at will has what? No defined terms, okay? Everyone's just, I'm staying here. You're cool with that. Okay, so you guys are probably saying, so you're not going to be paying them? Well, paying them establishes a period, because you have to say, hey, what are you going to be paying them for? Yeah, it's basically like day to day. But here's the thing. If I pay them for a day, okay, if I pay them for a day, then it's actually a period to period where it is, whatchamacallit, where it is basically, you know, where money's exchanged. So someone asked, an estate at will can be renting a room in a hotel. So you're talking, and it said young people destroyed the room and the manager is kicking them out. So an estate at will, everyone's okay with it. So, and also this, I would say that it's not an estate at will renting any kind of hotel room because there's a defined period. So what happens is that would be more of an estate for years, because if I stay in Disneyland, okay, I'm renting a room for X amount of months, okay? So what happens is this, in a hotel, okay, or anything like that, I'm paying, so we're defining a period, whether it has a definitive ending or it's open and they're like, no, you can just stay here every day, all the time, okay? And here's the thing, you get more into the minutia, and I like to entertain this because you guys are interested in it, but as far as what you need to know for the test, basically what I've told you is the stuff you need to know for the test. So let's look at the last one, which everyone kind of knows really well, which is an estate at sufferance, okay? What is an estate at sufferance? No defined terms. Landlord, not okie dokie. So basically, no defined terms, illegal holdover, the landlord suffering, not okie dokie, okay? So guys, how did I do there? Did I clear it up? Deadbeat tenant, yeah. Good old deadbeat tenant. So guys, did I clear that up for you? Did I help you out with that? Did I help you out with less than freehold estates? I hope I did. And I know we got into the weeds with a couple things there, but I hope that that clears it up to help you identify what it is that you have, okay, when you're looking at it, okay? Okay, awesome. So I feel like we went really deep into two things. So let's see if we could get some, I really do want to go over contracts, okay? So that's where we're going to go next, because I think contracts are a big area where people miss a lot of points. So I want to talk about contracts so that it could help you out. So contracts, what do we need for a valid contract? Okay, what do we need for a valid contract? What do we need? Yeah, we'll do appraisals next because you asked. That I'm cool with, okay? So I always use the acronym CLOCK. That's competent parties, okay? Legal object, okay? Offer and acceptance, and consideration, okay? So we have competent parties, legal object, offer and acceptance, and consideration. Now, offer and acceptance, I also put the situation here where it is, okay, also a meeting of the minds, okay? That's a meeting of the minds. So tell me, how does that differ from delivery and acceptance in regards to delivery and acceptance in regards to whatchamacallit, a deed? How is that different? Okay. So yeah, it has to have a meeting of the minds, right? It has to have that good old meeting of the minds, okay? The meeting of the minds is important because delivery and acceptance just means, hey, here's the deed. And then the person, the grantee goes, okay, here's the deed. Thank you so much. But when it comes to a contract, what happens is this: we have to agree to the terms, okay? And one of the things that I was asked earlier today, if and I'll put this question right here, okay? Meeting of the minds and have to be communicated. Yeah, so watch this. So I'm going to actually ask you a question, ask a question of you guys. So seller accepts offer, signs it, puts it in desk drawer, tells no one. Is it a contract? Okay. Seller accepts the offer, signs it, puts it in the desk drawer, tells no one. Is it a contract? You guys are too smart for me. You guys are too smart for me. Or maybe I made it too easy. I don't know. Maybe it's one or the other. I don't know. But it definitely is not a contract. Okay. So this is a big old nope. Okay. This is a big old nope show. Okay. It is not a contract. It is absolutely 110% not a contract. Okay. So offer and acceptance has to be made. It has to be a meeting of the minds. It has to be delivered and communicated. Okay. So that acceptance has to be communicated. Now, what happens if a buyer makes an offer on something and then the seller counters? Okay. So what happens when the seller counters? What happens to the original offer? Okay. What happens to the original offer, guys? The original offer is canceled, rescinded, all that kind of stuff. Okay. It's not, it doesn't exist. It's not, couldn't. So yeah, and really good for you to say the offerer becomes the offeree. So who's the offerer? Okay. Who is the offerer in the original one? Offerer gives, offeree receives. Okay, so the offerer is the buyer, the offeree is the seller in the original offer. Okay, and then they flip, because as soon as the seller gives the counter offer, what happens is the seller becomes the offerer and the buyer becomes the offeree. Now, we need to just identify a couple things in regards to contracts in regards to let's see, I'll put that there. Okay, we have to talk about the different things a contract could be. Okay, so a contract could be express or implied. What is an implied contract? What is an implied contract, guys? What do I mean by implied? Actions. Okay, yeah. So let me give you a couple of examples of what an implied contract could be. I sit down to have dinner and I go, oh my God, dinner at a restaurant. Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Okay. So an implied contract, and someone said verbal only. It's not verbal. What it is it's a contract that's understood through actions. So there's actually nothing verbal that is said. Okay. So what happens is this. I go to a restaurant. I say, the filet mignon, please. Medium rare, okay, or rare because I actually prefer that, okay, like a real steak connoisseur. So what I will tell you is this: I order that filet mignon rare, okay. Then here's what happens: they're going to bring the steak out. I am going to eat the steak, and then I will pay for the steak, okay. At no point do we express those terms. Me ordering the steak implies the rest of what's going to happen. My actions of saying filet mignon, rare, okay? Drive-through restaurants is implied, absolutely, because you go up to your favorite drive-through. My favorite drive-through is Arby's, okay? Go to Arby's, order your little roast beef sandwich with cheddar with the side of au jus and the mozzarella sticks, because let me tell you, they have the best mozzarella sticks. That's an implied contract, okay? And if you don't know that yet, you need to go to Arby's and get yourself some mozzarella sticks and then message me and say, wow, changed my life, life-changing, okay? So that is an implied contract. What's an express contract? What's an express contract? Yeah, they have really good apple turnovers too. You're right. Yes. Thank you, Lisa, for telling me in the chat. So an express contract, you say, is written? What if it's oral? Let me ask you this, okay? So basically, here's what's different about a express contract, okay? Express contract, the terms are clearly defined. So for those of you who don't know this about me, I have a fountain pen collection. So let's say you came to my office and you go, oh my gosh, Stu, I didn't know you had an awesome fountain pen collection. And I'd be like, yes, I collect fountain pens. And then you could say, oh, so I'd like to buy that pen off of you. And I'd say, okay, I'll sell you that pen for $300, okay? And you would probably sit there and go, oh, that was a $300 pen? But then once we get over that, if you say, yes, I would love to buy that pen off of you for $300, then what happens is this. That is an example of an express contract, okay? The terms are so Brenda said, wow, no, thank you. That's on the low end of my fountain pen collection, actually. So, yeah, if that makes you clutch your pearls a little bit, it is actually, my $300 pen is not a Mont Blanc. I have more expensive ones that are actually Mont Blancs. But I digress a little bit. So yeah, an express contract is one that is clearly defined. It could be written or oral, okay? So it doesn't have to be written. Understand that. The terms of the contract are clearly laid out and defined. I sell you my pen for $300. You receive the pen. I get the $300. Now, the next thing that a contract could be is unilateral or bilateral, okay? So let me ask you this. What's a bilateral contract? What's a bilateral contract? What is that good old bilateral contract? Basically what that is a promise for a promise, right? So I give you my pen, you give me the $300. That's a bilateral contract. Now, what is a unilateral contract? What is a unilateral contract? What is that? So it's not that it's one-sided, and I think a lot of people usually think that. It's that it's binding to one party, okay? So what happens is this. It's always binding on the offerer, okay? The offerer is the one who is bound to act. If the option is exercised, it then becomes a bilateral contract, okay? It then becomes a bilateral contract. So what happens is this. If I give you the option to purchase my property, okay? If I give you the option to purchase my property, okay, what happens is this. You could choose to purchase it or not. However, if you do choose to exercise the option, it's binding to me, okay? The offeree, okay, or the optionee, okay, the optionee is not bound to it. Now, let me ask you something. This is a good question, and I think this is covered on the test. Does an option contract need to be in writing? Okay. Does an option contract need to be in writing? Some people are saying yes. Some people are saying no. What are we thinking with this? Okay. What are we thinking? I'm actually curious about something. So I'm actually, okay. So here's what I will tell you. The actual option, okay, the actual option does not need to be in writing, okay? The actual option does not need to be in writing, okay? But the sales contract that comes after the option would have to be in writing to be enforceable. To be enforceable, it would have to be in writing. Yeah, the option doesn't need to be in writing, okay? It doesn't need to be in writing, okay? To be valid, it wouldn't need to be. So I usually say options do not need to be in writing. There is nothing in any text that I've ever seen that says they have to be in writing. Now, prove me wrong, send me a text and say, hey, I saw this. But what I'll tell you is this, and just so you guys know, because I know a lot of you guys look in different textbooks and you look in different material, stuff like that. There might be a state-specific portion of this because a lot of us are from different states, okay? So what happens is this. There are some times where there's state-specific laws, okay? So absent state-specific laws, there is no federal law that says that, or any contract law that says that an option needs to be in writing, okay, to be enforceable, okay? But they say that the statute of fraud says that a contract of sale needs to be in writing. So here's what happens. You remember when I said the option is a unilateral contract? And once exercised, it turns into a bilateral contract? The bilateral agreement for the sale of real property needs to be in writing to be enforced in a court of law, okay? Next thing that I will tell you is this. Let's talk about the next two things. And that is executory and executed. Executory and executed. So what do those two things mean? What does executory and executed mean to you guys? So executory means not completed, still stuff that needs to be done. Yeah, so if we have a contract of sale and it's not completed yet, it's in process. Yeah, it's on its way to being completed, it's executory. If it is executed, that means it's done. Kaplitskis, good to go, okay? Good to go. So let's get some erases in here. Do you guys have any questions so far? Have I done it? Have I cleared up some things for you? Okay. Let me know in the chat if I've helped you guys out as far as the completion, all that kind of stuff. If you guys are like, ooh, I like this. Yeah, this is helping me out totally. All right. Awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. So someone said good review. I love it. Yeah, I'm glad that I'm helping. That's what I'm here for. All right. So let's talk about everyone's favorite thing: void, voidable, unenforceable, and then let's just say enforceable. Everyone loves this. They're like, oh my God, I'm so glad that we're here. I'm so glad that we're talking about this. So what would make a contract void? What would make a contract void? And I'll tell you this, just so you know, just so you guys know, that my teaching on this has changed throughout my 13 years. And that's because I get arguments and new material or new cases come up, new jurisprudence come up, stuff like that, where I have to sit there and go, well, okay, I could see how that could be a situation. I will tell you, void is the most easy to identify. Void is there's an illegal object to it. Void is not legal, okay? So let me give you an example. It's either the objective of the contract is illegal or a component of the contract is said to be illegal. A contract to sell crack cocaine, illegal. The object of the contract is illegal. I want to buy your house, okay? Cool, awesome. That's a totally legal contract. With 5 pounds of heroin. No, that's an illegal component. So what happens is this. That means the contract would automatically be void, okay? Void, nada, done. Now, also, if it is an incompetent party, and what do I mean by incompetent? I mean declared legally incompetent by a court of law, okay? Declared legally incompetent by a court of law. What does that mean? They can never, at any point, be competent, okay? So if someone is incapable of ever being competent, they cannot enter into a contract, okay? So this goes back now to, and does that make sense? Okay, so those are all reasons why a contract would be void, okay? Those are all examples of times that a contract would never, ever, ever be able to take flight. The next one is voidable, okay? The contract could be disaffirmed. It could be rescinded, okay? It could be either of those things by one of the parties, okay? So awesome, yeah. Entered into, so someone said, I get confused understanding unenforceable and enforceable. And I'll explain that to you because that is, unenforceable is the hardest to understand, okay? Voidable is the second hardest to understand, okay? I think void, everyone gets, okay? Void, everyone's like legality. Voidable is duress. Contract with a minor if it is legal to enter into a contract with a minor. So keep in mind, if I have, let's say I have a fountain pen and a 16-year-old goes, oh my God, I love that fountain pen. I would love to buy it. There's nothing illegal about a 16-year-old buying a fountain pen from somebody. Nothing, okay? They can enter into that contract. I will tell you, my friend owns a comic book store. All of his clients are under the age of 17 and male. So like he has like 10% female. So basically it's all minors, okay? All minors, okay? He wouldn't have a business if he couldn't engage in some sort of business with a minor, okay? So here's what happens is the contract is voidable with a minor if it is legal to enter into said contract with the minor, okay? If there are state laws that preclude it or there is an illegality in it, it will be void, okay? But if it is legal, it is voidable on the part of the minor, okay? That's the minor part. Duress, incompetence due to inebriation. What do I mean by inebriation? Drunk, okay? So here's the thing, okay? you were like, Stu, you just said incompetent parties cannot sign contracts. You're correct. If you are deemed to be legally incompetent by a court, okay, then what happens is this. You will never be able to sign a contract because there will never be a time where you will have a cohesive mindset, okay? So let's say I'm at a bar with my best friend, JJ, okay? And JJ says to me, Stu, I'd love to buy your guitar for $500. I'm like, that sounds amazing. And JJ is 5 sheets to the wind. And we sign it on a napkin. Yes, we're going to sell the guitar, and he's going to buy it for $500. Next day, I come to his house with the guitar. He's sober. He looks at me. He goes, yeah, we're good. I know I was drunk, but I still want the guitar. Like, cool, awesome. But what happens is the court systems deem that anybody who is declared legally incompetent, okay, meaning that they cannot agree to anything, are people or individuals who will never be able to sign a contract. So a drunk person, someone under duress, someone under the influence, let's say you're high as a kite, okay? This is, yeah, 5 sheets to the wind. I know you like my sayings. I have to throw in my jokes every once in a while. So what happens is this. So what happens is, if you are under the duress, under the influence, any of those things, it is voidable on your part. So when you come to it, or you are no longer under duress, then what happens is you could void the contract. So basically what happens is there was a temporary state that you were in at the time you signed that contract that you could later say, no, not good with that, okay? Voidable means one of the parties can still back out, right? So basically the party that was under duress, drunk, under the influence could back out. That's voidable. So now we get to our real tricky one, unenforceable. Now, have to understand this with unenforceable. Unenforceable means that the contract is not void and it is not voidable. So we have a contract that is said to be, so unenforceable contracts are said to be legal and binding to the parties. It's basically binding to the parties, but cannot be enforced in court. So that is a great contract. That would be an example of an unenforceable contract. Love that one. So an oral contract contrary to the statute of frauds. Perfect. Yes. An oral contract for the sale of real estate. That would be a perfect example of one that would be unenforceable. Court of law. And basically, like, that's like one of the only examples of a true unenforceable contract, okay? Because again, we're saying it does not hold the status of void, so it's for a legal purpose. It is not voidable, so everyone signed it or did it or agreed to it under, clear guise, and it's something that is not voidable. But what happens is this. They're basically saying, the court is saying, hey, we can't enforce that. But if you guys agree to it, you guys are cool with it, it's binding amongst the parties, okay? So any contract that is not voidable, but might be, I always refer to it as a meh contract, because again, an oral contract to buy real estate, okay, although could be enforceable amongst the parties, would not be enforceable in a court of law due to the statute of frauds, okay? Does that make sense, guys? So basically, you have to sit there and say, hey, is it void? Is it voidable? If it's not, then you say, does it meet all the muster to be enforceable in a court of law? Okay. If the answer is yes, then it's an enforceable contract. If a court of law will not enforce it for some reason, then it is said to be unenforceable. Okay. So here's the thing. A voidable contract, like that's been signed under duress, is said to be voidable. If the party who has the right to void it does not void it, it becomes an enforceable contract. Okay? So that is, so if it isn't closed in a certain time, you have to, Lisa, you have to give me more information than that. What isn't closed in a certain time? And what are we talking about? So you're saying if a closing doesn't take place due to at the time that the closing was supposed to take place? That's still enforceable. That would still be an enforceable contract. Failure to perform. So failure to perform is not an unenforceable contract. If you enter into a contract and there are no contingencies in it, you could be sued for specific performance in a real estate contract. That means, if you're the buyer or the seller, that means that you're basically saying, I do not allow the microphone in the webinar, because what happens is if I do, it gets absolutely craziness. So that's why I only do the typey. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Frowny face, but that's for audio quality, and that's quality control. Yeah, it's just, that's the easiest way for me, because otherwise we would have dogs barking, kids screaming, and literally I would spend 10 minutes going, hey guys, could you mute your mics? Hey guys, could you mute your mics? Hey, we're getting background noise. Okay, so I'm a Zoom professional, okay, and that's why I say that. Now, what I will tell you is this, okay, if you miss or do not perform, basically you could be sued and held to that contract, because it sounds like you're describing for me a contract that is enforceable, that someone is in breach of. Okay, so if someone's in breach of contract, there are remedies that every party would have. Okay, one of them being specific performance for a real estate contract, which basically you're suing, the seller would be suing the buyer to purchase. Much harder to do that. The seller usually is extremely unsuccessful. Or the buyer is suing the seller to sell. That is usually the specific performance that actually works. Very hard to get a buyer to buy if they're in breach of contract. Very hard. Okay, so that is contracts. Did that help you guys out? Tell me. Give me a thumbs up. Say, oh my God, Stu, it's much clearer right now. And even though, here's the thing, this is what I will tell you. When it comes to void, voidable, unenforceable, enforceable, there are still gray areas. Like, you would have to literally sit there and talk with me about every scenario, every situation where we could go, all right, this is that. So here's the thing. That's why I'm saying to you guys that this has been a malleable part of my learning and my teaching, that I'm giving to you 12 years of thinking about it, scratching my head and going, okay, yeah, I see why that's that. Okay. So if you heard me 12 years ago, you might have been like, oh, you were much easier on the eyes. However, some of the stuff that came out of your mouth was bad. Okay. And it's gotten better over the years. So that's why you're getting really the best version of what I think is the best explanation that I could give you. So I said appraisals next, right? Of course I did. So appraisals it is. Okay. So let's talk about it. What is an appraisal? What is an appraisal? What is this? This is basically an appraiser's estimate and opinion of value, okay? An opinion of value, okay? Now, why do I say an opinion of value and not an opinion of market value? Because it depends. It depends on why the appraisal's ordered. You know, why the appraisal's ordered is super important, okay? It's super duper, uber amazingly important, okay? Because that kind of dictates a lot of things. So what happens is this: the appraiser has a lot of choices, a lot of options in front of him. They have to consider the three approaches to value. So an appraiser does have to consider the three approaches to value. And those approaches are the sales comparison, also known as the market data, okay? the cost approach, and the income approach. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about each one. And what we're going to do is then talk about when an appraiser would probably use each of these scenarios, okay? So sales comparison approach, market data approach. What type of property are we going to probably be using this one for, okay? What is the type of property we're going to be using that one for? And I'm also going to erase over here on the other side so I give myself more room. Boop, 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 boop. Someone said a school, special use building. Yeah, love it, love it, love it. Actually, no, I just said the sales comparison approach. I'm sitting here. We're going to be talking about residential homes on this one, okay? Residential. This one would be our schools. Cost approach is going to be our schools, okay? Oh, you thought I said cost. I'm sorry. You were right if I said cost. And I apologize. I might have. Income is any of our commercial properties, okay? And let me talk to you about each one of these. Now, let me ask you this, okay? In the sales comparison approach, now here's what happens is a appraiser always refers to the property that he doesn't know the price of as the subject, okay? So the one that he doesn't know the price of is always the subject. And what he does is he gets comparables, okay? Now, yeah, I'm getting I don't even have any alcohol on my desk tonight. I actually don't drink. For those of you who don't know that about me, I don't drink. I drink Shirley Temples. I'll eat gummy bears, but I don't drink alcohol. Actually, that is a funny thing about me. So here's what I'll tell you. You ready? The comparables. What we always do as the appraiser, he's always going to adjust the comparable up or down, because what he has to do is he has to make the comparable equal to the subject. So if the subject has 3 beds and comp 1 has 4, then what happens is we're going to say, oh, that's better than the subject. So what we have to do is the opposite. We have to lower the price, because here's what happens is the comparables are closed. Comparables are closed. So the appraiser knows the price of what they sold for, right? So he's just going to adjust the properties up or down depending on what the situation is there, okay? So that is what the appraiser is going to do. The next thing, okay, is this. They're going to just keep going with the comparables there. I want to ask you this question, okay? Because I said that the income approach is used for, I want to hit this one next. The income approach is used for commercial properties, okay? And what they do, I'll give you a little math. You ready? Do a little math. If you see a cap rate problem, okay, know this. Uncle Irv wears a cap. Yeah, Brenda said the subject never gets adjusted. So in the sales comparison approach, the subject never gets adjusted. Subject is never adjusted. Always make the adjustments to the comparable, because you don't know the price of the subject. So how the heck are you going to adjust it? So in the income approach, if you have a cap rate problem, okay, I always say Uncle Irv wears a cap. So if you see cap rate in the problem, always know Uncle Irv. And let me show you what the formulas actually mean. Income divided by cap rate equals value. Income divided by value equals cap rate. The cap rate times the value gives you income. So basically what you have to figure out is this. You're always going to have 2 of them, okay? You're always going to have 2 of them. And what you have to figure out is what it is they're asking you in the math question, okay? And I'm going to leave this up here so you guys could take a picture of it. You can look at it. You can be like, you can write it down. But that is literally cap rate problems right there. You need nothing else. You could literally figure out everything. So if you said, hey, we need to figure out a cap rate, Boom. You know that you need to figure out what the income is and divide it by the value. Okay? Boom. Perfect. So that I'm going to leave there. Now, we know the income approach has to do with income, right? Income producing properties. Let me ask you a question. Here's a great one. Let's say I have a residential home. This residential home, okay, is rented, okay? So it's a residential rental, okay? It's a residential rental. And what happens is this. What is an appraiser going to use? What approach are they going to use? So it's a residential property, and it's a residential property, and it's being rented. So what are we going to use? What is the appraiser going to use as an approach? Which one? Someone said income approach. Sales comparison. Ooh. Here's what you're going to use. Sales comparison approach, more than likely. Okay? Sales comparison approach is always the approach that an appraiser would use on a residential property. Unless it's new construction and there aren't a lot of comps, then he would use the cost approach. But if it's a residential home and there are comps available, they're going to use that because the income approach just probably wouldn't be appropriate unless there's an overwhelming amount of income properties. But even then, I would still say there's probably enough sales data as well. And sales data would always trump the income approach. Basically, we use the income approach because there's too many dissimilarities between the commercial properties, between one commercial property versus another. There's too many adjustments that would have to be made for any of the properties that would have been sold. So what they do is they use the income approach in order to come up with a value, okay? And value equals the income divided by a cap rate, okay? So that is the appraisal portion. That's what I want to go over on that. I don't want to go too much into that because I want to hit on a couple other things, okay? Because we have to get the most bang for our buck tonight, okay? So that means more things the better, okay? More things the better. We do a little erasey, okay? And let me ask you this question as I erasey. What is the final step in an appraisal? What is the final step in an appraisal? So what is the final step that an appraiser is going to take? What is that final step? Anyone know? That's called reconciliation. Reconciliation. Okay? He's going to reconcile. Yeah, that's okay. You could forget. Don't worry about it. That's why I'm here. That's why they pay me the big bucks. So let's go into debits and credits. Let's talk about that for a moment because I think that's where I want to wrap up and end everything tonight. Okay? So let's talk about debits and credits. Let's talk about a closing statement. So what happens is this. We're going to have the buyer and we're going to have the seller. So we have the buyer and the seller. Now, let me ask you this question. If we have the buyer and the seller, okay, we're going to be doing debits and credits to each side. What is a debit? What is a debit? What is a debit? If I said we debit the seller, we debit the buyer, we debit this. This is so confusing. I'm going to help you. Don't you worry. A debit is money owed. So what is a credit? Okay. A credit is money that is owed to you. So now, in a crazy, insane, absolutely bonkers world, okay, if there were no other charges, okay, if there were no other charges, the buyer would be debited. So that's what I'm going to use on this screen just to draw this out. Okay, would be debited the sale price and the seller would be credited, okay, the sale price. Okay, so you debit the buyer the sale price, credit the seller. So if there are no other charges, if there are no other charges, what happens is this: the seller would walk away with whatever the sale price is, and the buyer would have to get all that money out of the bank. Now, what happens is this, though. We don't work in a perfect world like that, okay? We don't work in a bonkers world like that. Although it is 2020, yes, we're not that crazy just yet. So what happens is this. In a situation where we're having, where we're trying to figure out, okay, how much does buyer owe? How much does the seller owe? What happens is this. The buyer is going to be credited a bunch of things for the sale price that aren't going to actually impact. So this is probably the first principle that you have to understand about debits and credits. The first principle you have to understand about debits and credits is that each side does not necessarily balance out. So if you do something on one side, it's not necessarily going to be the opposite action on the other. Let me show you what I mean. The seller is getting the sale price. Okay, he's not getting any more than the sale price. He's getting the sale price right now. Okay, we're talking nothing else has happened so far. All we know is he's getting the sale price. Now, there's a couple of things that go into the sale price for the buyer. So he's debited the sale price. So he's not going to the bank and taking out $400,000. Okay. Unless it's an all-cash deal, he's not doing that. So we'll just put $400K here as well. What he's doing is he's probably getting that money from a bunch of different places. So he's going to be credited the earnest money, okay? So he's put money up front. He's going to be credited that earnest money, all right? What else is he going to be credited? He's going to be credited any loan. So let's say he took out a $300,000 loan. He's going to be credited. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to debit this side because all he's doing is collecting money to go into and pay off the amount that he owes for the sale price. So someone wrote in, so the buyer always gets credited the earnest money. Yes, as long as the earnest money is not in the buyer's possession, okay, he would get credited the earnest money because he doesn't have to take that out of the bank. Basically, what we're trying to solve for here is this. How much money do they have to bring with them, okay? And then what we're talking about here is how much money they're walking away with, okay, at the end of the day. That's really what it is it's basically saying, hey, how much money does the buyer have to come to the table with? Hey, how much money is the seller walking away with? That's literally what this is trying to figure out. So what happens is this. We would probably debit the commission on the sale side, any attorney fees, okay, AF. This one would probably be debited attorney fees as well, okay. So what happens is you simply have to figure out what are going to be charges on each side. So now what I'm going to do is scare everyone with the prorations. So I appreciate that I cleared that up for you, because this is something that once you understand what it is they're doing with the closing disclosure, it's really easy to understand what goes where. The next thing we're going to talk about is the prorations. Prorations. Now understand this. Whenever you have to prorate, they work off of a 360-day calendar in a year, and every month has 30 days, okay? And every month has 30 days. So what happens is this. If we had a proration where, and there's a couple other things that you need to know. You need to know what the word arrears means, and you need to know what the word advance means, okay? So they will tell you that things are either paid in arrears or things are paid in advance. So that I can get a drink of water. Tell me what the word arrears means. What does the word arrears means? Okay. What is that one? What is arrears? Now I'm going to clear it up for some of you. So Lisa, it's not already paid. Arrears means you pay in the future for stuff that's already happened, okay? So if I told you that the annual taxes were paid in arrears at the end of the year, what I'm saying in layman's terms is that the basically on December 31st, the taxes are going to be paid for the prior year, okay? So December 31st, 2020, okay, the taxes for 2020 would be paid, okay? So arrears means it's paid later for what's already happened. Advanced is the opposite of that. Basically, you're paying into the future for what hasn't happened, okay? Arrears and advance are the opposites, okay? So what happens is, in most proration situations, you have to figure out, is this paid in arrears or is this paid in advance, okay? Now, I'm going to give you my tips and tricks to help you with proration problems, okay? We won't do one, but what I want to do is give you my tips and tricks, which here's the thing, you could apply it to almost any. So the first thing is understanding what arrears and advance means, okay? So if something is paid in arrears on an annual basis, okay, and the closing takes place at any point during the year, okay? So think about this. Think about what I'm saying. Something is paid on an annual basis, right? So I'm going to put this annual, okay, in arrears, okay, annual in arrears, okay. What happens at the closing table? Who is debited? Who is credited? We could call it anything. We could call it the gas bill. We could call it the tax bill. We could call it anything that you want. Okay. Someone is debited. Someone is credited. So if something is paid annually in arrears, what happens at the closing table? I will tell you what happens. Okay. The seller is credited, you said? Why would the seller be credited? That might be because think about this. You ready? Follow me. Let's say June, okay? Well, what happens is this. The seller hasn't paid anything yet because I told you arrears, you pay later for stuff that's happened. And I said this is paid annually in arrears, meaning that 2020 isn't going to be paid until December 31st, 2020. Meaning that what happens is the buyer is credited, right? In this scenario, the buyer would be credited and the seller would be debited because the seller owes the buyer for the portion of what they used, okay? So 12 months in a year, what happens is the seller would be debited for what they have used, and then the buyer would be credited. And then at the end of the year, the buyer would pay the full bill. But they have already been credited at the closing, so the seller's portion of it has already been taken into account. They've just been paid earlier on at the closing table. So that is arrears. Now, let's say something is annually paid in advance, okay? Something is now paid in advance. So let's say all of 2020 is paid for. What do you think happens? What are we going to do with the buyer? I'll give you a hint. It's probably the opposite. We're probably going to debit the buyer, credit that seller. Yeah, there we go. You see? So advanced, always debit the buyer, credit the seller, right? If something's paid in advance, you debit buyer, credit seller. That would help if I actually put an S there. When it comes to arrears, it's always going to be credit the buyer, debit the seller. Always. Always. I mean, there's just no math that you could possibly do that it's not going to be that way. Now, let me tell you a couple of other things that you want to do with math, okay? Someone said, thank you for going slow for the understanding. Yeah, and that's what I'm here for. Look, I'm not here to blast through this material. I'm here to make sure that we have, I give you the most bang for your buck. So that's the goal. I'm not here to pander to the recording. I'm not here to pander to anything else. This is a one-on-one class that you guys have with me. We're a nice, small little group here. So that's why I'm able to really go slow. So thank you guys for spending time with me tonight. That helps me out a lot. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Whenever you have a proration problem, divide it by 360. Just divide it by 360. Okay? Divide it by the number of days. Why? Always work in days. Okay? I always work in days. Because typically the closing happens on the 5th, the 6th, the 15th. You'll have to figure out days. You figure out how many months have been occupied or how many months are going to be occupied. You multiply it by 30 and then add the days. Always understand this. The buyer is responsible for the day of closing. The seller is not. Buyer is always responsible for day of closing. Seller isn't, okay? So that's what I would do in regards to any proration charges. Divide it by 360 and figure out how many days it's going to take you to that you need to account for. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I didn't get to everything. If I started going through any of the other situations, I would not do them justice, okay? So that's why I'm going to end it right here. If we went into finance, fair housing, we'd probably be here for another 15, 20 minutes. And what happens is, and I'll tell you why I cut it short, I typically start losing my voice at the 2-hour mark, and that's whatchamacallit. Let's see. Ooh, thank you for saying great pace. Yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it. So let me end the recording here, and we'll chit-chat for a little longer, guys, so I could give you some TLC. So everyone who's watching the recording, thank you for watching. Have a good one.